Hello, hello. My name is Linda, also known as Tortajala around the internet. I love creative journaling and all things stationery. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about my fountain pen ink swatches, journals, and a reference binder that I created. So, when it comes to fountain pens and fountain pen inks, there comes a time when you have more than a handful of inks and maybe lots of ink samples as well because it's so easy to acquire them through purchasing and trading. And yeah, you just start to accumulate so many different inks. And it's natural to then want to log your inks and maybe have like a good system for like your ink swatches and like reference items. I used to only have like 5 bottles of ink, so it was very limited and easy to keep track of. I didn't really like feel like I needed anything. But after I got the Diamine Inkvent calendar in December, that was like 25 bottles added to my collection. And of course, from there, it just increased exponentially. Even though the like small 10 milliliter bottles of the Inkvent, it doesn't seem like a huge amount of ink, but 10 milliliters can fill like a pen 5 times, really. Um, and afterwards, after playing so much with all of the ink vent inks, I got a little bit obsessive, and I guess that's what happens. Like when you dive into something, basically playing with the ink sort of spurred on my curiosity about fountain pen inks, and then you start to discover so many different, colors and brands out there. And of course, you can buy samples, as I did, as I was searching for like my, go-to brown ink. And I also bought many, many bottles. Sometimes, like diamine inks, they're pretty inexpensive here in Europe anyway. Like 2 samples would be like a whole bottle. So it's not necessarily good to just buy more of something that you're not sure you like, but it's just so much easier to buy the bottle. And sometimes there were inks on sale or like the ones that are being discontinued. And so it seemed like a good opportunity to get it. And I was just very curious about different brands so that I could at least try one ink from like a different brand to see if I felt, any difference from them. And before I knew it, I have like over 50 bottles of ink. Yeah, things grew exponentially. And so I was really searching for some way to like organize the inks, to log all the colors, because gosh, like my memory of an ink color, I don't know, sometimes it's just completely wrong. Maybe I just have bad memory, but you really just have to see it in front of you at that moment to really understand. And oftentimes, like I find that when like I'll have an impression of an ink and then I'll revisit it and my impression will change, and I guess that could happen as well. And I noticed that because I am drawn to certain colors and like shades, I did end up buying like very similar ink colors in the end, even if they're from different brands. Yeah, I'm just drawn to what I'm drawn to, right? So I just wanted to share in this video a little show and tell of the different ways I have tried to swatch my inks and organize things. These are just for the bottles that I have, not the samples, because if I have a bottle, it means that, it's a fair amount that I'm going to be using for a while, so it makes more sense to have like the reference. So in the beginning, I would swatch inks in my Hobonichi A6 journal. This is from 2023. And so I use it more like a scratch notebook because it has, good Tomoe River paper and you can really see really nice ink properties. And, it's fun to swatch inks in a journal just, just playing around. But I soon realized it was very annoying to have the swatches in a bound book for reference purposes because if you are actually trying to compare swatches and they're on different pages, it's just very hard to do. So then I tried to swatch all the inks on watercolor paper. So I just cut these like pieces of watercolor paper out myself because I already have watercolor paper at home. And so I thought that I would swatch the ink and then add a little water at the end here to see what happens if I add water in case I ever want to use the inks for painting purposes as well. So I started doing this, and it's definitely helpful and like, nice to see the swatches on separate cards because again, it makes it very easy to compare inks like side by side as compared to swatches in a book, right? But over time, I realized that these swatch cards, it's weird. Like they're too big and they're too small at the same time. So they're too big in the sense that um, it's taking up a lot of space and I didn't really have any kind of good like storage or anything. So it's just like a bunch of cards that I had on my desk and it was just, all over the place and it just didn't really seem organized in any way. But they're also like too small in the sense that I really love seeing the really big ink swatches that people do like in their journals just because it's pretty, like you can see the variation of ink when it pools in certain areas or where it's like very lightly layered on another part. So even though it's not necessarily what it looks like in writing, like the ink itself. It's just a very pretty swatch, and I just like that. I enjoy that. So it's sort of like these swatch cards are too small to get the satisfaction of that giant swatch that I'm talking about, but too big just for reference purposes because it's taking up all the space. And yeah, it was just getting messy on my desk, and I just didn't like it in the end. And so, of course, I contemplated, like, oh, do I need to buy like the actual swatch cards that many different companies sell? But I was like, no, it's the same thing, right? Like, why would buying swatch cards help in any way? So what I ended up doing was re-swatching everything on just smaller strips of watercolor paper. And I hole punched it so that it could go in this big ring and that would be much more organized. And I can still reorder it because it is a ring. And the idea for this is that it is a very quick reference. I can still compare colors side by side, but because it's like this long strip, one, it's easy to like just create this the swatch itself, but I can just fan everything out and compare swatches easily. So I can rearrange over time, add more over time, and I don't have all of them done right now. I'm sort of doing it whenever like I ink a pen. If I haven't swatched it yet, then I'll swatch it. Um, but these small swatch cards, I think, are a really good like card type of reference. But in addition to these swatch cards, I also made myself a big ring binder ink reference journal. And I know, this seems so redundant, right? But hey, I like playing with inks as well. So part of it, I guess, is also to have fun. Because basically what I'm missing is that big ink swatch that I was saying that I really like. So in this ring binder, this is an A6 VDS ring binder in the tobacco color, and this leather is supposed to be very easy to clean and like good for everyday use, so I'm hoping that even if I splash ink on it or something, it's not going to ruin it. And basically what I do in here is the big ink swatch. It's like an A6 size paper that I get to, swirl around the ink and have fun and have it for reference. And the reason it's in a ring binder instead of a notebook is because I have it, in color families. So I can basically rearrange and add pages freely. So it makes it easy to keep things organized. And I like this system much more than doing like swatches in a bound book because this is a reference. And of course, when you add a new color, you gotta like stick it in with the same color family. By the way, I do move around my swatches sometimes because there are some inks where I just keep changing my mind if I consider it like a purple or a blue. I guess that's part of the fun too. And I think over time, sometimes you just change your opinion depending on what other inks you have. So I can group things differently however I see fit because basically it's a reference for me personally. So it doesn't matter if other people consider, uh, you know, the ink a green or, a gray or whatever, because basically I have them grouped for my own purposes. So if I want to explore like all the blue colors that I have, then I can flip to that section and consider all the blues that I personally have bottles of. So these reference pages, they're really simple. Like they just have a huge swatch with a date on top and, the name. And I also add in entries of the ink whenever I use that ink in a pen, so I can write, my impression. And I also add entries even if I use a sample ink, but they don't have giant swatches because the giant swatches are, the ink bottles that I have for the purposes of, these inks that I'm supposed to use up. So I'm pretty happy with this whole setup. It suits my needs, and maybe it's sort of extra, but like I like having these different ways of referencing ink colors. The small swatches are, it's like very quick, whereas this bigger reference is more for like logging a bit more information. And obviously, when I'm exploring, you know what I mean, and like looking at multiple inks more closely and trying to decide on something. Yeah, and it's just fun. So I think it's like part reference and practical, but also just fun. So, that adds to the fun. Um, but to add to all of this, I mean, I think this is, already something that works well and all that you need. But to add to this, I actually have another stack of ink swatches done on Tomoe River paper in this Passport TN. So, yeah, I realize this is a total repeat and seems a bit crazy. I didn't plan this though. The reason I have these pages in here is because I used to play with inks on loose sheets of Tomoe River paper, especially when I was going through the Diamine ink vent like the first time. So, after the fact, I had all these loose sheets of like really nice paper, right, with ink swatches, and I didn't just like want to trash them. So, I decided to crop them all to passport size and just put them in here, sort of like as an on the go ink reference. That is obviously very messy and like casual because, you know, these were not done with like this page in mind. And my thought is that I can swatch here just for fun, and it is Tomoe River paper, like OG paper from like 10 years ago. So I think that's why like I don't want to, get rid of them because I just want to use them in some way. These pages, they're just slipped into this Passport TN under the elastic, so it's not even like bound or anything. Technically, I can change the order, but I realize it is getting pretty fat because I have like so many inks in here. But yeah, I just thought that if I ever go anywhere, like a store to buy inks, then I can have my ink swatches for reference here. Or like one day if I go to like a pen show or a meetup where like you can try inks and pens from other people, I have this that pretty much has all my ink swatches, and I am adding new ones as I get them just to have them in here, but like smaller, in a, more organized manner. But at the same time, this is not precious. Like, I don't mind scribbling and doing whatever. You can see many of the pages are like really messy because it's just for ink testing and to see the swatch on paper. Whereas the A6 rings reference is at home, and I don't intend to take that really anywhere. So this Passport TN, messy ink journal of swatches is not like super organized or anything like pretty. It's just messy play. And I think it's really fun. Like it's sort of nice to have something that is more casual. I think I've seen people who have a page in their journals or planners where throughout the course of a year they'll add like a swatch of ink or a scribble of like whatever pen they're using that week or something. So at the end of the year, you see like all the colors. I think that's really cool. So I guess this Passport TN is like a huge mix of like all the inks that I own basically. Um, and it just goes to show that there are probably so many ways to get creative and incorporate your love of fountain pens and inks with like your journaling practice in general. So, yeah, there's probably a lot more I can do and other ways that I can play with inks in my journals. I have so many journals, but I do have ones that are very like specific to inks because I pretty much just use fountain pens and ink swatches in them. Probably because they're Tomoe River paper journals, so it just makes sense to use it for that purpose. So I swatch and play and free journal in those types of bound notebooks. They are not for reference or for record. I don't know if I'll keep them, forever. They're not organized in any way. It's like a big mess, but it's just for journaling play. I also have a very giant moleskin, which by the way works with fountain pens, and I do my morning pages in here. So it's just free writing, and I use whatever pen I feel like that day. Yeah, so I have like these A6 Hobonichi. This one is dated 2025, so I realized I should probably use it following the dates, rather than treating it like a random notebook. But yeah, I don't know why I didn't think to do this earlier. But yeah, this year has just been a bit off when it comes to my planning system. I'm sort of all over the place, and basically nothing is really what I intended from the beginning of the year. Um, and I was so confident about it too. That is like the sad part. But anyways, that is a topic for a future video because I know I have not yet updated on my planner journal situation since the beginning of 2025, so I will do that. Watch out for that. But in this video, I just wanted to share all these like fountain pen, ink, journal, log, and reference stuff. So for this A6 ring binder, so far I've been very focused on inks, obviously, so like swatching by color and adding the quick journal entries every time I ink a pen. But I realize I might want to add another section. It's sort of like cross-referencing, a section by pen instead of ink color. So I don't know, that might get confusing if you change the nibs of your pens often. But I know people do this where they log their fountain pens. So they will have a page that's for a particular pen, and then they add in an entry each time they ink it. So then you can sort of see like the history of that fountain pen, all the inks that you've used with it, and your thoughts and, the differences. I do realize there probably exists some type of software or website where you can log your fountain pens and fountain pen inks, but I feel like the whole idea of like fountain pens in the world of journaling, I just want everything to be old school analog. So I do this. It just feels more fun and satisfying. I really have no desire to like go into a digital system. So even though it might seem like harder to cross-reference and log things in a manner that keeps it flexible, I think that the ring binder system is like flexible enough. You can add entries per page and you can switch the order as you please. And so I think it's working. And I like this smaller A6 size because basically it's one thing per page. So if you keep a whole page as one entry, it's much easier, obviously, to reorder and add things in. But I do realize that this small size page, it doesn't cater to doing like big spreads where you compare a bunch of inks together. So obviously that's why most people have, the larger A5 like ink play type of journal. Um, so maybe that's something that makes sense to have part of like this whole ecosystem for your fountain pen life. So I'm still figuring things out, and I will be adding to all of this as I see fit. But mostly, I just want to, use all the things, have fun with my fountain pens and inks, and I suppose that is the point at the end of the day. So let me know if you have a system or way of logging your inks and pens. I'm always interested in learning how others organize their fountain pen and ink collections, what makes sense and is actually helpful for reference and practical, use. So thank you so much for watching. I very much appreciate it. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to my channel for more stationery and journaling videos. I hope you have a lovely day. Until next time, bye.